Morning, February 16th, 2012, third day of the ongoing Don't Be Self-Sabotaging and Do Not Be Self-Destructive in Your Patterns and Behaviors video blog attached to my website here, the website being Free Yourself from Yourself, which is the best I could come up with. On the website, I articulate 8 practices that one can engage in. Practices meaning like kind of daily things that one can do to not, the whole point of the website, the whole point, it's about awareness, it's about discipline, blah, 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 blah. The whole point is, how do we create lives? How do I create a life where, I'm not self-sabotaging. I don't act in impulsive ways based upon emotions or feelings that end up sabotaging me and end up hurting me. And of course, if they hurt me, by extension, oftentimes other people are hurt. So that's number one. And number two, how do I get to a place in my life where I really feel that I'm living in a way that's real and true to who I am, and who I am at a very core level, not who I want people to see me as, not who, I think my parents would love to see me as ... So, today is Thursday. I'm taking my children down to Florida tomorrow. Now, I'm poor, so, because I've moved from job to job my whole life. I'm almost 50 years old. I've been a teacher and a high school principal, but I was only a high school principal for half a year. There's an interesting story. Left in the middle of the year, I resigned. If I look back on it, though, I totally sabotaged myself at that school. I totally set myself up for failure. So I'm I don't have money. So my parents pay for all of the plane tickets and stuff and everything to go down to Florida. So I kind of live this upper middle class existence. But when it comes to finances, I'm totally working class, if not working poor. But that's another story. As I'm getting ready to head down to Florida, I'm having all kinds of huge conflicts or emotions about spending a week with my children, whom I adore, and yet it's hard for me to be the sole caretaker for an entire week. I find that very challenging. And also to be with my parents, who I also, in sort of as a son, I love them, and yet our relationships are very toxic in many ways. And there is the triggers that are set off in me, particularly in relationship to my mom, are dramatic. Now, do I then come out and say it's because my mom is blah, blah, blah? No. They're my triggers, She is who she is. They're my triggers. So, this is going to be an interesting week. We drive down to Boston tonight, stay at a hotel in Revere, Massachusetts, and then off to the airport tomorrow, and a week in Sarasota, Florida. Now, what's interesting is as leading up to this trip, there's been just a lot of internal dialogue, a lot of that internal, playing out what these conversations are going to be like with my mom and my dad. And what are my perceptions? I think often, in the first of my practices, the first practice in the website that I write about is this idea of don't believe everything you think. I get all kinds of thoughts, all kinds of perceptions, and I have to challenge them all the time because oftentimes they're just not true. Like oftentimes my perceptions do not reflect other people's perceptions. I remember I was working at a school once and I went into the headmaster and I was complaining about this and that, and he said, Dan, you're not teaching 23 Dan Weintraubs in your class. They're each individuals, it's not like the whole world is like you and sees the world like you. And I was like, oh, this is when I was like in my early 20s. I was like, that's how brutally narcissistic I was. I've come a little ways since then. But, so I have to constantly, when I have perceptions or about something, and particularly perceptions about what my parents might be thinking about me, etc., I have to constantly step back and challenge that and not act upon it, not react to it. I'll give you an example. This morning, I get an email. Now, I wrote a book about soccer coaching last year. Whatever, it's 93 pages, a very small book. I self-published it. I think I've sold 7 copies. Whatever. So my mother emails me and says, there's this guy in Boston who just wrote a book about soccer coaching. You should get in touch with him. And like my trigger, my gut reaction is to say to her, would you just leave me alone? Like, now, where's that coming from? So step back. A lot of that comes from all kinds of places of perceiving that she is saying to me, Dan, you're not good enough. You need to have published a book that sells 1,000 copies or 10,000. All of these perceptions that may be completely wrong. My mom might just be making conversation, right? It might just be idle prattle on her part. So much of this process of not sabotaging oneself is not acting upon perceptions, not believing everything I think and then acting upon that. That's when I get into so much trouble, because I end up in a place where I'm in conflict with people based upon my own doings, my own construction of reality that may not be what is real for them. So, off I go to Florida. I will do my best to keep up with the daily blog entries. It should be an interesting week. I hope that you will take a look at the 8 practices on the website. They are, I think I said earlier in this entry, my practices. Nothing of the 8 practices is particularly mysterious. They are culled from all kinds of multi-thousand-year-old religious or spiritual traditions, a lot of them. Meditation, not believing everything you think, sitting with discomfort. Being okay with being sad and in pain and not running to other ways to get away from it. There are all kinds of things in these practices that are just common sense, and they're based upon sort of the culling of schools of psychology and religious, etc., spiritual. So I hope you'll take a look, and I will keep doing my thing and seeing if these next few days in Florida could be some pretty verdant ground, right? This is what Pema Chodron says, when things are really like, when stuff is and you're just grinding away, and I'm obsessing about stuff, and I'm all worried and my stomach is in knots. That's the good stuff, because that's when you've got real good fodder for growth, right? It's not fun, but it's good stuff. Okay, thanks for listening. See you tomorrow.